wonderful to be here at Mount Madonna. It brings back so many wonderful memories because this is a place that has really lived community and a place where there's been no separation between community and education. It's been a braided way, and in many ways, in our deepest humanity, we live a braided way, a place of many strands of experience coming together, and that are undivided. And it's an illusion in many ways, or self-created, where we place artificial divisions between mind and heart, or body and spirit, or personal and professional, or family and work, when in many ways, like the beautiful song this morning, everything is in a confluent flow of the river, and so one of the things that has been interesting to me about the human spirit and about community is that in our inherent DNA, every human being on this planet, regardless of their cultural conditioning or their family imprinting, is involved in three major processes. That's all one river. And I love the image of the river that started with the beautiful song this morning, and it reminded me of John O'Donohue's beautiful one-line poem, which he loved, called Fluency. And 2 years before he died, he had written it, and he used it as a personal vow every day, which was, I want to live my life like a river carried by the surprise of its own unfolding. I want to live my life like a river carried by the surprise of its own unfolding. And the three processes that are all one river in confluences that every human being is involved with every single day of their life is work with self. It's the longest relationship we'll ever have, is with ourself. And how do we befriend ourselves, and how do we become to know ourselves? And that's a universal experience that every human being is involved in. And I love what Oscar Wilde says, you might as well be yourself because everyone else is taken. And it's so interesting that many traditional cultures of the world and indigenous wisdoms, in their language, they have no means for comparison. In their language, like better, best, or larger, smaller, because they actually believe that inherently we have our own original medicine to offer that's nowhere else duplicated in the world, so no need to compare or no need to feel that you have to compete. And I think it's an awesome fact if we really thought about it and really believed it. We could change the world. For example, even with identical twins, no human being has the same fingerprint. If we put every voice on a sonogram in this room or in the world, even with identical twins. The voice pattern is completely different. And ophthalmologists or eye doctors have long recognized that the texture and the color of every human being, even with identical twins, is very different. And so what does that say about the human spirit and the human species? That we have an original imprint, and that it's imperative that we give voice to what it is that we see. And that every human being is really here essentially for two purposes. One is to learn about love and to express love, and the other is to create and to serve and to contribute. And we're all original medicine. And so the work with self, to befriend oneself. Who do I live with the most, shower with the most, eat with the most, sleep with the most is myself. And so what is the quality of relationship that I have in the ultimate befriendment with myself, and to recognize that I'm in a fallible mystery. Every human being is really a fallible mystery. And how to befriend my fallibility, and also how to befriend the fallibility of others, but also the glorious mystery, the original medicine that is nowhere else duplicated in the world. And the second process that every human being is involved with, besides the relationship with self, is this thing that's called the one-to-one relationship. Myself and a partner, myself and a friend, myself and a colleague, myself and a child, myself and a dog, myself and the tree, but a connection with one other is the crucible of intimacy and the crucible of friendship, where we begin to learn about connection and being and relationship, the art of relating just to one other person, And we all are born into a small community called family. We enter life in community. And a definition of community and culture is 3 or more people. 3 or more people. So all of us enter in some kind of community. And so it's in our DNA. Community is in our DNA. Being alone and self-sufficient is in our DNA. The ability to have a quality connectiveness to another human being, where we can learn about intimacy in the truest sense. Into me, see. Into me, see. Intimacy. How willing am I to allow others into me, see, or to see me in some way? And the third process that universally we're involved in, besides work with self and this one-to-one work, is called group work, or teamwork, or community work, or working within organizations, or within teams, or within sports, or within ensembles, musical ensembles. And can I show up in my full power and gifts and talents and resources and the quality of heart and personhood that I am in a group as strongly as I do on a one-to-one, or as strongly as I do when I'm alone in my own sufficiency? Those are the 3 major universal processes, where no human being is exempt from those 3 processes. And some of us love being by ourselves and being fiercely independent. Others of us like this one-to-one. We like the intimate conversation, just one-to-one. and we thrive on that. And others of us really we flourish within teams, or we flourish within ensembles, or we flourish within a community, or we flourish within an organization. So it's just interesting. In every decade of our life, the mark of a whole person is one who is in flow with those three processes. The mark of a healthy person, that I'm as comfortable being alone and by myself as I am in a one-to-one relationship as I am in group. That's called the great confluence, or the great braided way. And the real function of a human being is what the philosopher Arrien said. The glory of God is a human being that's fully alive. But many of us have succumbed to walking the procession of the living dead. Or we use the great gift of life as a spectator sport. Or we get our feedings from each other like hungry ghosts, because we cannot tolerate being by ourselves, and we feed off of each other to keep reassuring ourselves we're okay. And so one of the great questions that I've been thinking about is, what really galvanizes community? Children galvanize community. And there are no strangers anywhere in the world where there are children. We never make children strangers. Everyone galvanizes towards children. And wherever there are children, there's always community. What else galvanizes community besides children? You will always find a community present at the four great mysteries that every culture of the world ritualizes. And the four great mysteries that every culture of the world ritualizes is birth. Wherever there's a birth, there's a community. Wherever there's death, there is a community. Wherever there's marriage, there is community. Wherever there is initiation, there is community. Birth, initiation, marriage, death, all those four mysteries galvanize community. And they touch on all the three processes. In those three mysteries, at birth, an individual changes. A partnership or a friendship gets deeper. And the whole community is restored or healed or reassembled in a deeper way. So I've been thinking about also, how can I track whether I'm still alive and refusing to walk the procession of the living dead? How can I track that? Because some of us don't know that we're in the procession of the living dead. So, traditional people say, you know you're still alive and refusing to walk the procession of the living dead if you can still be inspired. So it's important to track, just this year, who or what has inspired me. Because wherever I'm inspired, it has meaning. Otherwise, I couldn't be inspired. So if you want to track what has meaning in your life, take a look at who and what is inspiring you. Just take a look at this year. Who or what has inspired me this year? I'm still alive, refusing to walk the procession of the living dead if I can be inspired. Second, tracking. Who or what is challenging me? Because challenge, in the truest sense, is an invitation to grow and stretch and move beyond the knowable and the familiar. So who or what is challenging me this year? Is asking me to stretch, to move beyond the knowable and the familiar. And he came through the back door with his big black sombrero, black snapping eyes, flashing smile that was contagious and riveting. And on his chest was a string of bullets. But if you looked closely between the bullets, stuck were sweet little wild flowers. And he dared by his stance that everyone look at him. And they did. And there in the far corner was a silver-haired woman that with great doe eyes held his gaze. And he took off his sombrero and threw it across the room, and it landed at the base of her feet. And everyone stood up and cheered, "Viva Zapata!" And Zapata was always known for, "Do not call me a revolutionary, I'm an evolutionary," he would say. And he had a charisma that changed an entire nation. That's the kind of challenge. Where am I being challenged to a whole nother level within my nature, asked to grow and stretch, move beyond the knowable and the familiar? Where am I currently being seized by the creative fire, the fire that takes no wood? Where is that fire in my life, the challenge where I'm seized and I lose hours of time? The third river to track, besides the river of inspiration and the river of challenge, is the river of surprise. And I love what the Inuit people say. There are always two plans to every day. There's my plan, and there's the mysteries plan. And we all fill our life with appointments that we're determined to keep, but we don't make enough space for the mysteries plan. And every day you can count on a surprise or the unexpected. You can count on it. Because surprise is for purposes of showing us where our attachments are. And so, what's been the biggest surprise for me this year? How have I surprised myself this year? It's the river of surprise. And it's also with the river of surprise, because surprise teaches us and shows us where we've lost our sense of humor, where we don't think it's funny anymore. And surprise and humor keeps us flexible and malleable and resilient. And it's good to track where I don't think it's funny anymore. I mean, where I really don't think it's funny anymore. I don't think that's funny. It shows me where my attachments are. And that's why I love so much. In China, they have a wonderful phrase, "Be like a bamboo reed, firm yet yielding. Not too firm because you'll be breakable, and not too yielding because you'll be too diffused and undefined. Be like a bamboo reed, firm yet yielding." And surprise shows us, how flexible am I? How fluid am I? Children always approach the day, I wonder what's going to happen next. I wonder what's going to happen next. And as adults, when there's a surprise, we often go, who's responsible for this? how did this happen? So how much joy, how much laughter am I willing to bring into my life? Because it's part of our inherent aliveness. And even cross-culturally, we make sure that there are always three incredible, uplifting aspects of the human spirit that are universal. There's not a culture in the world that does not have song and music. There's not a culture in the world that does not have dance and sports and movement. The body wants to move. The human spirit wants to move. It's not a culture in the world that doesn't recognize that storytelling and stories are the oldest healing teaching art that we have. And there's not a culture in the world that doesn't recognize that in the sweet territory of silence, we touch a mystery in silence and in contemplation and reflection, a deep mystery that we cannot touch in any other way. So often when you would go to a shaman or a holy person or a medicine person in traditional peoples, they'll ask you, and you say that you're disheartened or dispirited or depressed. They'll say, when did you stop singing? When did you stop dancing or moving in your body? When did you stop being enchanted by stories, and particularly by your own life story? And when did you stop being comforted by the sweet territory of silence? Because wherever we stop singing, wherever we stop dancing or moving in our body, or being enchanted by stories, and particularly our own life story, or comforted by the sweet territory of silence, is where we begin to experience soul loss or loss of spirit, and especially the inherent human spirit. The glory of God is a human being fully alive, fully engaged, not talking about life, engaged in life. Not talking about relationship, engaged in relationship. Not talking about community, engaged in community. And for the last 10 years, I've been obsessed with collecting little true stories. One of them you already heard about, Zapata, but here's another one that is about a human being fully engaged no matter the circumstances. And it's a very short little story, and it's a true story. It's written by Dr. Charles Garfield. If you've ever gone through a toll booth, you know that your relationship to the person in the booth is not the most intimate you'll ever have. It's one of life's frequent non-encounters. You hand over some money, you might get change, you drive off. I've been through every one of the 17 toll booths on the Oakland-San Francisco Bay Bridge on thousands of occasions and never had an exchange worth remembering with anyone. How about you? Late one morning, though, in the late 90s, headed for lunch in San Francisco, I drove toward one of the booths, and I heard loud music. Sounded like a party or a Michael Jackson concert. I looked around. No other cars with their windows open, no sound trucks. I looked finally into the toll booth, and inside, the man was dancing. And I asked, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm having a party." And I said, "But what about the rest of your colleagues?" And I pointed to the other toll booths, no one dancing there. And he said, "They're not invited." I had a dozen other questions for him, but somebody in a big hurry to get somewhere started punching his horn behind me, and I drove off. But I made a note to myself, find this guy again. There's something in his eye that says there's magic in his Tollbooth, and there's magic in his life. Months later, I did find him again, still with the loud music, still having a party. Again, I asked, what are you doing? And he said, oh, I remember you from the last time. Well, you see, I'm still dancing. I'm still having the same party. And I said, but look, what about the rest of the people? And I started to point at the other toll booths. And he said, what do they look like to you, those toll booths? And I said, well, they just look like toll booths. And he said, no imagination. No imagination. I said, okay, I give up. What do they look like to you? And he said, vertical coffins. Vertical coffins. And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, well, I can prove it. 8:30 every morning, the people get in and then they die for 8 hours. And at 4:30, like Lazarus from the dead, they reemerge and go home. And for hours, for 8 hours, brain is on hold, dead on the job, going through the motions. I was amazed. This guy had developed a philosophy, a mythology about his job. I couldn't help asking the next question. Well, why is it different for you? You're having a great time. And he looked at me and he said, I knew you were going to ask me that. He said, you see, I'm going to be a dancer someday, and he pointed to the administration building. My bosses are in there, and they're paying for my training, you see. 16 people dead on the job, and the 17th, in precisely the same situation, figures out a way to live and truly be engaged. That man was having a party where you and I would probably not have lasted 3 days. The boredom. He and I did have lunch later, and he said, I don't understand why anyone would think my job is boring. I have a corner office, glass on all sides. I see the Golden Gate, San Francisco, the Berkeley Hills, half the Western world vacations here, and I just stroll in every day and practice dancing because, you see, I'm going to be a dancer someday. The fire that takes no wood, regardless of my circumstances. What has heart and meaning for me? And where am I being inspired? Where am I being challenged? Where am I being surprised? And the last river, where am I being touched and moved by life? Because where I'm being touched and moved by life's experience, my heart is still open and I'm still alive. So this year, where have I been inspired? Where have I been challenged and stretched, moved beyond the knowable and the familiar? Where have I been surprised and delighted? And where is my sense of humor? How flexible am I? And the shortest distance between two people is laughter, says Victor Borge. So the human spirit, regardless of we're by ourselves or in a one-to-one relationship or in a group or on a team. The human spirit has 3 core competencies that are totally unshakable, that are used every single day, consciously or unconsciously. And those 3 core competencies are the human spirit in its DNA, wants to learn to learn. That's education. The desire to learn is inherent in the human spirit. It's in the DNA. And we learn in community, and we learn in one-to-one relationships, and we learn when we're by ourselves with the internal conversations we're having with ourselves, or connected with a greater mystery that resides at the core of who we are. And they're non-separable. So the first core competency, learn to learn. It's in the DNA. The second aspect of the human spirit is learn to choose. Human beings are a composite of every choice they've made, and a composite of every human being that has loved them or that we have loved. We underestimate the power of choice. It's through choice that we can create a whole new reality. It's through choice that we can let go of a reality. It's through choice that if we like this reality, we can maintain it and sustain it as long as we want it. The power of choice. Learn to choose. Learn to learn, learn to choose. And then the third great human core competency, which is all about love, is learn to relate. Building connections and relationships garners affection. And the human being, every human being, is always learning about connection and space. Connection and spaciousness, or another term for spaciousness is freedom. How to balance out connection and individuation, or connection and spaciousness, or connection and freedom. And they're the inseparable Siamese twins. Some of us need a little more space in some decades of our life. In other decades of our life, we need a little more connection, but we're not exempt. They're always a creative tension that is an unbreakable rubber band. Connection and spaciousness, connection and freedom, connection and relatedness. Nothing in nature survives if it's fiercely independent or excessively dependent. Because nature fosters interdependence. And the last core competency is about learning to relate, is all about connection and interrelatedness without fierce independence and excessive dependence. And interdependence is the formidable middle between excessive independence and excessive dependence. I think it's important to track, where am I choosing to learn consciously? Because it has meaning. And for some reason, you consciously chose to come here this weekend or this couple of days. It has some kind of meaning or relevance. You consciously chose to learn to learn. And you learned to choose. You made a choice about that. And this container forces us into relating, learning to relate in different ways. With ourselves, with one other, or with a small group, or with the large group as a whole.